I was halfway through equipment diagnostics in Hangar 18 when the intercom crackled to life. "Lieutenant Vaughn, report to Colonel Keen's office. Immediate." The duty officer's voice carried that particular calm that meant something was very wrong. I wiped motor oil from my hands and grabbed my jacket. Area 51 had a smell you never forgot. Diesel fuel, recycled air, and something metallic that clung to your throat like a warning. 3 levels below ground, past retinal scanners and security checkpoints every 50 yards, I found Colonel Keen's office. Major Caleb Morland sat across from him, field jacket still dusty, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Not the usual end-of-shift tired, the kind that came from seeing things that rewrote your understanding of reality. "Close the door, Lieutenant." Keen's voice was flat. A map flickered to life on the wall monitor, red markers scattered across the Nevada desert like blood drops on sand. 17 unauthorized movements in 6 weeks, Keen said. "The subjects are leaving containment and then returning." "The Reptilians," I said carefully. The word always felt like stepping off a cliff. "They're not escaping," Morland cut in, his voice rough. "They're appearing in multiple locations, simultaneously." My pulse quickened. "That's impossible." "Last Tuesday," Morland continued, "Staff Sergeant Holloway saw one inside the facility. Level 4, observation corridor. Same moment, Sergeant Beckett reported visual contact 15 miles northwest. Same entity, same description, same time." I stared at the map. The distance between markers was impossible to cross in minutes, let alone seconds. "You're saying it was in 2 places at once?" Keen's expression was granite. "Or they're not limited by location the way we understand it." He handed me a file. Incident reports, timestamps, coordinates. Every sighting followed the same pattern. Brief, silent, always at night. Witnesses from varied backgrounds, different experience levels, but their descriptions matched with surgical precision. "Why now?" I asked. "If they've been here for decades, why suddenly move outside containment?" "That's what you're going to help us discover." Keen nodded at Morland. "Major Morland leads field investigation. You coordinate data analysis. Every sensor log, every radio transmission, every atmospheric reading. If there's a pattern, I want it found." I closed the file. "And if there isn't?" "Then we're dealing with something that doesn't operate by any rules we understand." My office smelled like old paper and toner ink. No windows, just a desk, terminal, and filing cabinets that had seen better decades. I pulled up 2 months of sensor data and laid it out chronologically. The thermal signatures were wrong from the start. Reptilians didn't register heat like humans. Their body temperature fluctuated with environment, making them nearly invisible to infrared. But our sensors compensated for that, measuring disturbances in ambient temperature, air pressure shifts, anything indicating physical presence. The night Holloway reported his sighting, sensors showed a 9-second temperature drop. A localized pulse of cold, like something had passed through and stolen the heat from the air. Then nothing. I cross-referenced Beckett's report. His contact occurred simultaneously, 15 miles away, but his location showed no temperature anomaly. Just a brief electromagnetic disturbance, barely enough to register. 2 contacts. Same time. Different energy signatures, as if the same entity had split itself into 2 different forms. I printed the data and pinned it above my desk, then pulled the radio logs. At Area 51, every transmission was archived, every mic key, every static burst, time-stamped and preserved. At 0246 hours, 2 minutes before both sightings, there was a burst of static on the emergency channel. No voice, no signal, just white noise lasting 3 seconds. I played it back, slowed it down, ran it through a frequency analyzer. My stomach dropped. The static wasn't random. It was structured. A repeating pulse, evenly spaced, like a heartbeat. And underneath, faint but unmistakable, something that sounded like breathing. I flagged the file for Morland and went back through the logs. Every incident over 6 weeks had been preceded by the same burst. Always the emergency channel, always 2 minutes before visual contact, always followed by that rhythmic pulse. Someone, or something, was broadcasting before they appeared. I found Morland in the motor pool, checking gear. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I found something. I handed him the folder. He flipped through silently. When he reached the frequency analysis, he stopped. You're saying they're transmitting? Or something is. Every incident has the same precursor signal, same frequency, same pattern, like they're announcing themselves. Morland closed the folder. Or tuning in. What? To us. Our comms, our sensors. Maybe they're not broadcasting. Maybe they're listening first, figuring out who can hear them. The thought sent ice through my veins. You think they're selective? Holloway saw one inside. Beckett saw one outside. Same time, but their teams saw nothing. Why only certain people? That night, I reviewed personnel files for every witness, looking for commonalities, background, training, psychological profiles. What I found was chaos. Holloway was career military, decorated, steady. Beckett was new, quiet, kept to himself. Some had technical backgrounds, others didn't. No pattern in clearances, training, or experience. But there was something else. Something I almost missed. Every witness had notes in their psychological evaluations. Small flags. Heightened intuition, non-linear problem-solving, abstract thinking tendencies. Pattern recognition scores off the charts. They were people who noticed things others didn't. I highlighted the notes and added them to my report, staring at the screen until my eyes burned. The Reptilians weren't showing themselves to everyone. They were showing themselves to people whose minds worked differently, people who could see past surfaces, people who were already looking. Morning briefing. Morland stood before a tactical map, his voice clipped and precise. Night observation run. 4 personnel, Morland, Beckett, Holloway, Vaughn. High activity zone near Groom Lake. Document any contact. We left at 2100 hours. 2 vehicles cutting through darkness, gravel crunching under tires. The desert stretched endlessly, swallowed by night. No wind, no insects. Just silence that felt deliberate. We stopped at a ridge overlooking the dry lake bed. Morland killed the headlights. The temperature dropped immediately, and I stepped out into air so clean it hurt to breathe after months of recycled atmosphere. Holloway set up the thermal scope. Beckett scanned the horizon with binoculars. I pulled out my handheld radio, switched to the emergency channel, and listened. For an hour, nothing. Just static and starlight. I counted seconds, minutes, trying to stay focused. Counting kept you grounded when everything else felt designed to unmoor you. At 22:47 hours, the radio hissed. The static rolled in like fog. I adjusted volume. There. The pulse. Slow. Rhythmic. Breathing. I've got the signal, I said quietly. Morland moved beside me. How long? 10 seconds and counting. Thermal? He asked Holloway. Negative, clear in all directions. The pulse continued. 2 seconds between beats. Steady as a metronome. Then at 22:49, it stopped. The silence after felt heavier than before. I keyed my mic. Vaughn to base. Any movement inside the facility? A pause, then. Affirmative. Visual contact on level 4. Single subject, stationary. My heart rate spiked. Same location as Holloway's report? Affirmative. Observation corridor. I looked at Holloway. He was still pressed to the scope. Nothing out here. He muttered. But something had changed. The air felt different, colder. Pressure dropping like a storm rolling in, except the sky was clear. Beckett lowered his binoculars and pointed. There. I followed his sight line. At first, nothing, just sand and shadow. Then starlight shifted, and I saw the outline. Tall, motionless, standing in open desert where nothing should be. Contact, Morland said softly. Everyone hold position. I raised my binoculars. The figure was humanoid, but wrong. Too tall. Too still. Proportions that didn't match anything I'd seen in training files or briefings. Thermal? Morland asked. Negative. Holloway replied. No heat signature at all. The figure just stood there. Watching. Or maybe not watching. Maybe just existing in a way that had nothing to do with sight. I felt pressure in my chest. Not fear, exactly. Something deeper. Recognition without understanding. I checked my watch. 2250 hours. 2 minutes since the static stopped. Vaughn to base. Is the subject still on level 4? Another pause. Negative. Subject disappeared at 2249 hours. No trace. The same moment the pulse stopped. The same moment this thing appeared here. I looked at Morland. His jaw was tight. He was putting it together the same way I was. They weren't traveling. They were shifting. Not through space. Through something else. What do we do? Beckett whispered. Morland didn't answer immediately, just stared at the figure standing silent under infinite stars. Then it moved. Not toward us. Not away. It simply turned, slow, deliberate, and began walking. Not across the sand. Into it. Step by step. Sinking down. The ground swallowing it whole until there was nothing left but empty desert and the memory of something impossible. We stood in stunned silence. Cold air pressed against exposed skin. The smell of dust mixed with something faint, ozone maybe, or something my brain had no name for. Holloway lowered the scope. What the hell was that? Morland turned back toward the vehicles. We're going back. The drive felt longer than it should have. Nobody spoke. Headlights carved tunnels through darkness, revealing nothing but more darkness beyond. I kept replaying what I'd seen. The figure standing motionless, then sinking into sand like it was water, not disappearing behind anything, just descending, deliberate and calm, until earth closed over it. Beckett stared out the window, hands steady but jaw clenched. Holloway sat in back, arms crossed, eyes unfocused. At the main gate, guards waved us through without comment. We rolled into the motor pool under harsh floodlights. Diesel fumes mixed with cold desert air. Debrief in 30, Morland said as we parked. Holloway headed for the barracks. Beckett lingered, looking back toward the northwest, toward where we'd made contact. Then he followed Holloway inside. I stayed by the vehicle, checking gear, trying to process what had happened. The radio on my belt crackled once. A soft burst of static, gone before I could react. I pulled it free and checked the channel. Emergency band. Nothing transmitting. Just that single click. Like someone keying a mic, then changing their mind. I clipped it back and counted to 10. Then I went inside. Keen's office was crowded. Morland near the desk, arms crossed. Holloway and Beckett against the wall. And someone new, a woman in crisp uniform, early 30s, sharp eyes that tracked everything. Dr. Lena Frost, Keen said as I entered. Behavioral Analysis Division. Psychological review of all personnel involved in sightings. Frost nodded once. Lieutenant Vaughn, I've read your analysis. Impressive work. Keen gestured to a chair. Major Morland, walk us through tonight. Morland gave a concise report. Position, signal, the figure in the basin. No emotion, just facts that didn't fit together. Keen turned to Holloway. Confirm. No thermal signature. None, sir. Swept 3 times. Nothing registered. But you saw it. Yes, sir. Clear as day. But on thermal, it didn't exist. Keene looked at Beckett. And you? Same, sir. Saw it through binoculars. Tall, humanoid. Then it sank into the ground like the sand was liquid. Keene was quiet. Then he turned to Frost. Your assessment? Frost stepped forward, hands behind her back. The pattern is consistent. Visual contact without sensor data. Subjects appear selectively, only to certain observers, even in identical locations. This suggests the phenomenon isn't purely physical. Meaning what? Morland asked. Meaning the reptilians may be interacting with perception itself. They're not invisible. They're selectively visible. I ran comparisons of all witnesses, I said, pulling out my notes. Every single one had flags in their psychological evaluations. Pattern recognition, abstract thinking, non-linear problem-solving. They process information differently. Frost nodded. Exactly. The common thread isn't physical, it's cognitive. The reptilians appear to individuals whose minds operate outside conventional parameters. People who see connections others miss. People who are, neurologically speaking, incompatible with standard perception. The room went quiet. Holloway shifted uncomfortably. Beckett stared at the floor. You're saying we're being targeted? I said slowly. Not targeted. Frost corrected. Selected. They're not seeking you out. They're appearing where your perception allows them to exist. Think of it as a frequency. Most people operate on one channel. You operate on another. The reptilians exist somewhere in between. You're not seeing them because they're revealing themselves. You're seeing them because you're tuned to where they can be seen. Morland frowned. The simultaneous sightings. How does that fit? Frost pulled up the map. Red dots scattered across desert and facility. Some miles apart, some overlapping. Spatial limitations don't apply as we think they do. If the reptilians operate outside linear space, they can exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Not by traveling. By existing. They're not moving from point A to point B. They're present at both points at once. A chill ran down my spine. Quantum mechanics. I'm talking about something we don't have language for yet. Frost said. But yes, quantum theory offers a framework. Superposition, entanglement, something existing in multiple states until observed. The difference here is observation doesn't collapse the state. It reveals it. And only certain observers can do that. Keene stood and walked to the monitor, staring at the clustered markers. So what do? We can't contain something that doesn't obey spatial laws. We stop trying to contain it, Frost said quietly, and we start trying to understand it. Over the next week, Frost interviewed every witness. I sat in on most sessions, taking notes, watching her work. She asked strange questions about dreams, childhood memories, moments when time felt wrong or space felt stretched. She asked about déjà vu, about seeing patterns in randomness, about ever feeling like being in 2 places at once. Most answered cautiously, but the answers painted a picture. These weren't random personnel. They were people who'd always felt slightly out of step, who noticed things others dismissed, who'd learned to trust instincts over logic. On the 5th day, Frost called me to her office. Small room, white walls, single desk cluttered with files. I've been reviewing your cognitive profile, she said, pulling up my file. High pattern recognition, spatial reasoning. You also have what we call liminal awareness, an ability to perceive transitional states, edges, moments between things. I count a lot, I said. Helps me focus. It's more than that. Counting is measurement. You're constantly mapping space around you, looking for deviations. That makes you particularly sensitive to anomalies. The reptilians are living anomalies. They exist in spaces between what should be and what is. You're wired to notice that. Is that why I heard the signal? Probably. You picked up a pattern others missed. The pulse buried in static wasn't random. It was structured. A signal meant to be heard by people who know how to listen. I leaned back. So what does that mean for us? Frost closed the laptop. It means you're the only ones who can make contact. The reptilians aren't hiding. They're waiting for people who can perceive them. The question is why. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to ventilation hum. The sound was steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat in the walls. 2 seconds between each pulse. Always 2 seconds. At 02:30, I gave up. Got dressed. The base was quiet, most personnel asleep or on distant night shifts. I walked through empty corridors, boots echoing off concrete, counting steps without thinking. Found myself at the observation corridor on level 4. The same place Holloway had seen it. The hallway stretched ahead, lit by flickering fluorescence. Air smelled sterile. Filtered. Nothing alive in it. I stood at the far end and looked down the corridor. Nothing moved. I pulled my radio and switched to the emergency channel. Static. Faint and constant. No pulse. Just noise. Then at 0247, it changed. The static deepened, rolling like a wave. I adjusted volume. There, the pulse, slow, even, breathing. I counted intervals, 2 seconds between each beat. I looked up. At the corridor's end, something moved. Not walked. Moved. A shift in air. Distortion like heat rising off summer asphalt. Then it solidified. Tall. Motionless. Standing where nothing had been a second before. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just watched. The figure faced me. Arms at sides, head slightly tilted. Proportions wrong. Too tall. Limbs too long. Posture too still for anything human. Its skin, if that's what it was, had a faint sheen. Like wet stone under moonlight. No eyes I could see. No mouth. Just the outline of something resembling a face but fundamentally other. The radio hissed. The pulse continued. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. I forced words out. Why are you here? No response. It just stood there, watching. Or maybe not watching. Maybe just existing in the same space, aware of me in a way that had nothing to do with sight. I took a step forward. Air felt heavier. Colder. Fluorescence flickered once, held steady. Who are you? Still nothing. Just that stillness. That presence. Then the radio gave a sharp burst of static, and the figure shifted. Not moved, shifted, like a channel changing, like reality adjusting. One moment there, next moment gone, no fade, no blur, just absent. The pulse stopped. Static flattened to silence. I stood alone, heart hammering, breath shallow. Lights flickered. Air tasted like copper. I started to key my mic to report it. Stopped. If I reported this, they'd pull me off. Say I was compromised, seeing things, but I wasn't. I knew what I'd seen, and I knew it had been real. I clipped the radio back and walked out, counting steps. 37 to the elevator, 12 floors down, 42 to my office. At my desk, I pulled sensor logs for level 4. 0247 hours. Temperature drop 9 seconds, same as before. Then I checked perimeter sensors for the desert zone. At 0248 hours, 1 minute after my contact, another sighting. Beckett on night patrol reported visual contact near the same ridge. Same description. Same silent presence. 2 places. Same time. Same entity. I printed the logs and pinned them to my wall. then sat back, staring at the pattern taking shape. The reptilians weren't just appearing. They were testing us, measuring us, seeing who could perceive them and how far that perception stretched. And we were the only ones passing the test. By morning, I had a new report. 30 pages, data, timelines, sensor logs, witness statements. I handed it to Morland during briefing. He skimmed, eyes narrowing. You had contact last night. Yes. Why didn't you report immediately? Because I needed to confirm the pattern first. And I did. Beckett saw the same entity 1 minute later, 15 miles away. It's not random. They're coordinating. Appearing to multiple witnesses in sequence. Testing our perception. Morland closed the report. Testing for what? I don't know. But Frost is right. They're not trying to hide. They're trying to be seen by the right people. Keene entered, and Morland handed him the report. The colonel read in silence, expression unreadable. When he finished, he set it down. Dr. Frost has proposed a new protocol, controlled observation. We select high-sensitivity personnel, people who've already made contact, and position them at key locations, inside the facility and outside. We coordinate timing, monitor all channels, and wait. If they appear, we document everything. You're setting a trap, I said. No. Keene corrected. We're setting a meeting. The observation was scheduled for 2200 hours. 6 personnel total. Morland, Holloway, Beckett, Frost, myself, and Staff Sergeant Ramona Sills, a communications specialist who'd reported a sighting 3 weeks prior. 2 teams, 3 inside on level 4, 3 outside at the ridge overlooking Groom Lake. I was assigned exterior with Morland and Beckett. We left at dusk, same route as before. Desert cold, sky clear. Stars filled the horizon, dense and bright. No moon, just darkness and light pressed together. We set up at 2145 hours. Thermal scope, radio, recording equipment positioned to capture whatever happened next. I checked my watch, counted minutes. At 2200 the radio hissed. I adjusted volume. Static rolled in, building slow and steady. Then the pulse. Rhythmic, even, breathing. I've got the signal, I said. Morland scanned through the scope. Nothing yet. Beckett stood beside me, eyes locked on the dark expanse below. Focused, the kind of focus that comes from knowing something's about to happen. At 2202, the pulse stopped. The silence felt deliberate. Heavy. I keyed my mic. Vaughn to Frost. Any movement? Her voice came back calm. Affirmative, visual contact, level 4 corridor, single subject, stationary. My pulse quickened. Same location as before? Affirmative. I looked at Morland. He lowered the scope and pointed. There. I followed his line of sight. At first, nothing. Then starlight shifted, and the outline appeared. Tall, motionless, standing in open sand. Contact confirmed. Morland said quietly. Same position as last time. I raised binoculars and focused. The figure stood facing us, arms at sides, unmoving. But this time something was different. The air around it shimmered faintly. Like heat distortion. Like reality bending just enough to make space for it. Thermal? I asked. Negative. Morland replied. No heat signature. Beckett whispered, It knows we're watching. I felt it too, the sense that we weren't just observing. We were being observed back, measured, evaluated. The radio hissed. Frost's voice came through. The subject here is moving, slowly toward our position. My breath caught. Inside, the entity was approaching the team. Outside, it stood motionless. How far? I asked. 10 meters. Now 5. Morland kept the scope trained on the figure in the basin. It's not moving out here. 3 meters. Frost said. her voice steady, but tension underneath. It stopped directly in front of us. A long pause, then Holloway just asked it a question. What? I keyed the mic. What did he ask? Another pause, then Frost's voice, quieter now. He asked why they're here. I held my breath. The figure in the basin remained still. Stars burned overhead. Cold air pressed against my skin. Then Frost spoke again. It's responding, not with words, with something else, a feeling, a presence, like it's speaking directly into the mind. What's it saying? Morland demanded. Frost didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was different, shaken. It says we've always been here. We're just now being seen. The figure in the basin moved. Not toward us. Not away. It turned slowly, facing the horizon, and began walking. Step by step, sinking into sand. Ground swallowing it whole. I watched until there was nothing left. Just empty desert and silence. The radio clicked. Frost's voice. The subject here just disappeared. No trace. I lowered the binoculars. Checked my watch. 21 hours. 9 minutes of contact. 2 locations. Simultaneous presence. Morland packed the scope without speaking. Beckett stared at where the figure had been, expression unreadable. We drove back in silence. The weight of what we'd witnessed settling into every corner of the vehicle. When we reached the gate, Morland finally spoke. They're not prisoners here. They never were. I looked at him. Then what are they? He didn't answer. Just stared ahead, hands tight on the wheel, and drove through the gate into the light. The debriefing lasted 3 hours. We sat in Keen's office, recounting every detail. Frost took notes, expression unreadable. Holloway described the moment the entity moved toward them. Silent. Deliberate. Radiating presence that felt less like threat and more like attention. When I asked the question, he said, I didn't expect an answer, but it came anyway, not through sound, through sensation, a certainty planted directly in my mind. We've always been here. We're just now being seen. Keen listened without interruption. When we finished, he leaned back and stared at the wall. Then he looked at Frost. Your interpretation. Frost set down her tablet. The Reptilians aren't extraterrestrial in the conventional sense. They're not from another planet. They're from another layer of reality. A parallel state that exists alongside ours, but not within it. Most people can't perceive that layer. Their consciousness is locked to the frequency of linear space and time. But certain individuals, those with cognitive patterns that deviate from the norm, can tune into that layer. Not by choice, by nature. You're saying they've been here all along? Morland said. We just couldn't see them. Exactly. And they couldn't interact with us until we developed the ability to perceive them. Technology, infrastructure, the electromagnetic environment of a place like Area 51, it may have created conditions that allowed the 2 layers to overlap more clearly, or attracted individuals whose minds were already capable of bridging the gap. I spoke up. If they've always been here, why now? Why make contact? Frost met my eyes. Maybe because we're finally ready, or maybe because they need us to be. Over the next 2 weeks, sightings intensified. Not in frequency, but in clarity. The Reptilians were no longer appearing at random. They appeared in patterns, specific times, specific locations, always to the same group of individuals. Holloway saw one in the mess hall at 0600 hours, standing near the wall, motionless. Beckett encountered another during a supply run, standing on the highway shoulder under full sun. I saw them 3 more times. Once in my office, once in the motor pool, once outside my quarters at 0300, standing in the empty courtyard like it had been waiting for me. Each time, The radio signal preceded contact. The pulse, the breathing, 2 seconds between each beat. And each time, the entity didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, present and aware, radiating that silent attention. Frost conducted more interviews, tracking psychological changes in all of us. She said our perception was expanding, boundaries blurring between what we saw and what we sensed. Some personnel reported dreaming in places they'd never been. Others described déjà vu so intense they couldn't tell if they were remembering or experiencing. Holloway started carrying a notebook, writing fragments of thoughts that felt like they didn't belong to him. Beckett stopped sleeping, said the silence at night felt too loud, like something was listening beneath it. I kept counting. Steps, seconds, heartbeat intervals. It was the only thing keeping me grounded, the only rhythm I could trust. On the 18th day, Keene called an emergency meeting. Entire observation team plus Frost and 2 officers I didn't recognize. Secure conference room. No recording devices. No windows. Keene stood at the table's head, expression grim. 3 days ago, a similar phenomenon was reported at another facility. Classified location, different personnel. But same pattern. Selective sightings, simultaneous contacts, entities appearing to individuals with high cognitive variance. Details match ours exactly. Morland leaned forward. How many locations? 4 so far. All high-security sites, all within 6 months. Frost's expression tightened. It's not isolated to Area 51, it's expanding. Or, one officer said, it was always this widespread. We're just now noticing. Keene pulled up a map. Red markers scattered across the country. Nevada, New Mexico, Alaska, Utah. Each one a classified facility. Each reporting the same phenomenon. The pattern suggests coordination, Keene said. Not random appearances. Deliberate contact with specific individuals at specific sites. The question is, what are they coordinating for? I stared at the map, counted the markers. 12 total. They're building a network, I said quietly. Everyone turned. They're not just making contact. I continued. They're connecting. Every person who sees them becomes a node, a bridge between their reality and ours. The more people who perceive them, the more overlap between the 2 layers. Eventually the boundary won't exist anymore. Frost nodded slowly. That would explain the intensification. The more contact we make, the clearer they become. We're not observing them. We're anchoring them. Keene sat heavily. And if we stop making contact? We can't, Frost said. Perception doesn't reverse. Once you've tuned to that frequency, you can't untune. The only way to stop seeing them is to stop perceiving altogether. She trailed off. We all understood. Neurological intervention, chemical suppression, erasure. Holloway spoke for the first time. They're not hostile. They haven't harmed anyone. Not yet, the officer said. Not ever, Holloway insisted. If they wanted us gone, we'd be gone. They're just existing, letting us see them. Maybe that's the point. What point? Keene asked. Holloway looked at him, eyes steady. That we're not alone. And we never were. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Lay in my bunk, listening to ventilation hum. 2 seconds between each pulse. At 02:30, I gave up. Got dressed, walked to level 4. Stood at the observation corridor's end. Fluorescence flickered. Air still. Radio on emergency channel. Static. Faint. At 02:47, it changed. The pulse rolled in. I looked up. The entity was already there, standing at the corridor's end, waiting. I walked toward it. Air grew colder, heavier. Fluorescence dimmed, casting shadows that didn't match the hall's geometry. 10 feet away, I stopped. The entity faced me. Tall. Still. the outline of something resembling a face but fundamentally other. I forced myself to speak. "What do you want from us?" The radio hissed. The pulse continued. Then something shifted. Not the entity, not the air. My perception. The corridor's edges blurred, stretched, and for a moment I wasn't just standing there. I was standing somewhere else. A vast open space, dark, silent, filled with shapes that moved without moving. And I understood, not through words but through sensation, that this was where they existed. Always. A layer beneath or beside or within our own. A place with no location because it was every location. And we had always been there too. We just hadn't known how to see it. The vision faded. I was back in the corridor, heart pounding, breath shallow. The entity remained silent. Still. "You're not here to harm us," I said quietly. "You're here to be seen." The radio gave a sharp burst of static. Then, for the first time, I heard something. Not words, not sound, but resonance. Deep. Certain. Planted directly in my mind. Yes. The entity shifted. One moment there, next moment gone. No fade, no blur, just absent. Pulse stopped. Static flattened. I stood alone. Fluorescence humming. Air tasting like metal. My hands were shaking. I counted to 10. Then walked back to my office. Why only certain people? That night, I reviewed personnel files for every witness, looking for commonalities, background, training, psychological profiles. What I found was chaos. Holloway was career military, decorated, steady. Beckett was new, quiet, kept to himself. Ooh. Some had technical backgrounds, others didn't. No pattern in clearances, training, or experience. But there was something else, something I almost missed. Every witness had notes in their psychological evaluations. Small flags. Heightened intuition. Non-linear problem-solving. Abstract thinking tendencies. Pattern recognition scores off the charts. They were people who noticed things others didn't. I highlighted the notes and added them to my report, staring at the screen until my eyes burned. The reptilians weren't showing themselves to everyone. They were showing themselves to people whose minds worked differently, people who could see past surfaces, people who were already looking. Part 2. The field test, 423 characters, morning briefing. Morland stood before a tactical map, his voice clipped and precise. Night observation run. 4 personnel, Morland, Beckett, Holloway, Vaughn. High activity zone near Groom Lake. Document any contact. We left at 2100 hours. 2 vehicles cutting through darkness, gravel crunching under tires. The desert stretched endlessly, swallowed by night. No wind, no insects. Just silence that felt deliberate. We stopped at a ridge overlooking the dry lake bed. Morland killed the headlights. The temperature dropped immediately, and I stepped out into air so clean it hurt to breathe after months of recycled atmosphere. Holloway set up the thermal scope. Beckett scanned the horizon with binoculars. I pulled out my handheld radio, switched to the emergency channel, and listened. For an hour, nothing. Just static and starlight. I counted seconds, minutes, trying to stay focused. Counting kept you grounded when everything else felt designed to unmoor you. At 22:47 hours, the radio hissed. The static rolled in like fog. I adjusted volume. There, the pulse. Slow, rhythmic, breathing. I've got the signal, I said quietly. Morland moved beside me. How long? 10 seconds and counting. Thermal, he asked Holloway. Negative. Clear in all directions. The pulse continued. 2 seconds between beats. Steady as a metronome. Then at 22:49, it stopped. The silence after felt heavier than before. I keyed my mic. Vaughn to base. Any movement inside the facility? A pause. Then, affirmative. Visual contact on level 4. Single subject, stationary. My heart rate spiked. Same location as Holloway's report? Affirmative. Observation corridor. I looked at Holloway. He was still pressed to the scope. Nothing out here, he muttered. But something had changed. The air felt different, colder, pressure dropping like a storm rolling in, except the sky was clear. Beckett lowered his binoculars and pointed. There, I followed his sight line. At first nothing, just sand and shadow. Then starlight shifted, and I saw the outline. Tall, motionless, standing in open desert where nothing should be. Contact. Morland said softly. Everyone hold position. I raised my binoculars. The figure was humanoid but wrong. Too tall, too still. Proportions that didn't match anything I'd seen in training files or briefings. Thermal? Morland asked. Negative. Holloway replied. No heat signature at all. The figure just stood there, watching. Or maybe not watching, maybe just existing in a way that had nothing to do with sight. I felt pressure in my chest. Not fear exactly. Something deeper. Recognition without understanding. I checked my watch. 2250 hours. 2 minutes since the static stopped. Vaughn to base. Is the subject still on level 4? Another pause. Negative. Subject disappeared at 2249 hours. No trace. The same moment the pulse stopped. The same moment this thing appeared here. I looked at Morland. His jaw was tight. He was putting it together the same way I was. They weren't traveling. They were shifting. Not through space, through something else. What do we do? Beckett whispered. Morland didn't answer immediately, just stared at the figure standing silent under infinite stars. Then it moved. Not toward us, not away. It simply turned, slow, deliberate, and began walking. Not across the sand. Into it. Step by step, sinking down,